As a boutique owner, what would you do if you found out what your mannequin stand does at night after the boutique is closed? Sit down, grab your popcorn, and let me tell you an interesting story. Please subscribe to my channel because you may never see me again. Before she became known as Madam Amy, Amara was just a young girl born into pain. Her father died in a road accident when she was 10. 2 years later, her mother succumbed to a mysterious illness. Left with nothing but grief and a worn-out Bible, Amara survived on scraps and strangers' kindness. She wandered from town to town, doing odd jobs, until fate led her to the chaotic city of Lagos. There, under the shadow of Third Mainland Bridge, she stumbled upon a forgotten street in Makoko. A narrow path swallowed by fog and silence. On it stood an old, abandoned shop for lease. It was almost as if the place had been waiting for her. No one else dared to rent it. Locals whispered of strange shadows and music that played from inside at night. To Amara, it felt like salvation. She renovated it with money saved from years of hardship. She called it elegance and ember. As customers began to trickle in, her designs gained popularity, not just because of their style, but because they seemed to carry an aura. Like the clothes chose the people. What truly made her boutique stand out, however, were her mannequins. They were unlike any others. Taller, smoother, more lifelike. Their eyes seemed to shimmer. They were gifted to her by a mysterious woman in Yaba, who claimed they were imported from Europe. Amara took them, grateful and unsuspecting. Business flourished. The mannequins stood tall in the window, dressed to perfection, always catching the eye of passers-by. They looked regal, like silent guardians of the boutique. Some customers even complimented how alive they looked. Amara took it as flattery, unaware of the hidden truths behind the compliments. But then small things began to change. A dress displayed on a mannequin in the evening would be found on a different one by morning. Jewelry sets moved across the store floor with no explanation. Hangers dropped to the ground in the dead of night, caught only by the boutique's security system beeping without an apparent cause. Amara dismissed them all. Maybe it was the breeze. Maybe her staff rearranged things without informing her. Then one night, Grace, Amara's hard-working assistant, offered to stay back and reorganize a delayed shipment that had arrived late in the evening. It was almost 11 p.m. The city was quieting down, and the last buses were honking into the distance. As she bent to pack a box of scarves in the storage room, she heard a faint shuffle behind her. Not the sound of fabric, but something heavier, like a soft footstep. She stood upright quickly and peeked around the curtain. One of the male mannequins she named Charles had changed position. He was no longer facing the shop window, but turned sideways, subtly angled toward Linda, the bridal mannequin. Grace froze. Her eyes darted to the camera. Was it malfunctioning? She laughed nervously, telling herself it was a trick of the light, or maybe she hadn't noticed his pose properly when she arrived. Still, the air in the boutique suddenly felt thick, as though it had been holding its breath. Grace returned to her box, determined to finish quickly. But as she reached for a final folded scarf, a loud creak echoed behind her. This time, she turned fast, and she saw it. Charles's arm had lifted, bent at the elbow. Linda's head, unmistakably, was now turned, facing him. Her pale face almost glowed in the dim light. Grace's heart leapt into her throat. The mannequins were moving, not by breeze, not by mistake. She let out a sharp gasp, stumbled backward into a shelf, knocking down several hats. Without picking anything up, Grace grabbed her bag and bolted to the exit, her trembling hands fumbling with the keys. She locked the boutique, eyes wide with fear, and ran into the darkness, not once looking back at the glass window, behind which Charles and Linda remained still once again, as though they had never moved at all. The next morning, Grace told Amara everything. They moved. I saw them. They were touching, like humans. Amara frowned and said to Grace, I think you are seeing things out of imagination. I know you had a very long day at work, so I guess you were feeling sleepy. That is why you start imagining things that are not real. I think you need to take some days off so that you can have a rest and stop acting up. Grace wanted to argue, but stopped. The mannequins were back in their usual places. A week later, Amara forgot her house keys inside the boutique. She returned late at night with Nessa, another staff member. The boutique was dark, but as they approached, they saw something that froze their blood. In the far corner, where the bridal section was, the mannequins named Linda and Charles were moving. They were not just moving, they were making love in a twisted, grotesque imitation of human passion. Limbs tangled, grinding silently, their plastic faces expressionless, but somehow intimate. Suddenly, the door slammed behind them with a thunderous bang. Locked. The lights went off. Darkness. Then a low hum. A strange energy filled the room. The mannequins turned, one by one, toward Amara and Nessa, their eyes glowing faintly. A voice echoed, not from a mouth, but from the very walls. You dressed us in vanity. Now you will wear our curse. The boutique distorted into a void of horror. The walls pulsed like living tissue and twisted into endless cracked mirrors that reflected more than their images. They reflected guilt, secrets, and sins. The air reeked of burnt fabric and rotting plastic. The first trial was grotesque. Dozens of armless, eyeless mannequins stood in a circle, convulsing in place. At the center, a pile of clothes oozed blood. The voice returned. Dress them. Amara and Nessa hesitated. Each garment they picked up wept, like it knew what it was about to endure. When they placed the first shirt on a mannequin, its chest split open slightly, revealing wriggling threads like veins. As they buttoned it, the mannequin let out a loud scream, its mouth scream in agony, like the sound was escaping the boutique. The vibration echoed through the mirrors. With trembling hands, they continued. Nessa wept openly when one dress latched onto her arm. Her arms started to burn like a hot metal was placed at her hand and leaving burn marks. Nessa cried, but continued because she had no choice. The mannequins moaned her pains, shook violently, and collapsed only when fully clothed. When the last one dropped, the floor split beneath them. They plummeted into darkness. The second trial was worse. They landed in a corridor of whispers. Whispers that sounded like dead customers, voices they recognized. You sold me a cursed veil. My baby cried all night after I wore that dress. Why didn't you tell us what you knew? Each word stabbed their minds. Ahead of them was a narrow path made of broken glass and mannequin fingers. They were barefoot. As they walked, each shard cut deeper. Blood splattered behind them, marking every step. They felt the pain of their life, as if they have been sentenced to go to hell. The fingers grabbed at their ankles and cut it more deep. Some whispered in tongues. Others tried to crawl up their legs. It almost felt like it would never end. An endless pain and punishment that no one can ever imagine. Nessa almost collapsed, but Amara screamed, "Don't stop!" A gust of wind blew and turned into screams. When they reached the end, their feet were torn and dripping, but they stood tall. Then the final horror. The mirrors surrounded them again, but this time the reflections were not static. They moved. Amara's reflection held a baby she never had, and hurled it against the mirror. Blood splattered inside the glass. Nessa's reflection slit her own throat and smiled as it bled black. The mirrors shattered, and their reflections crawled out. No longer just twisted versions, they were demonic. Their eyes were empty sockets, mouths wide in inhuman grins. The battle began. No weapons, only terror. The reflections whispered every fear, every regret, every failure. You abandoned the truth. You wanted this power. You loved the fame more than your soul. Amara fell to her knees, but in that moment, she remembered her mother's voice, her prayers. She shouted them aloud. Ancient Igbo incantations poured from her lips. The air shifted. The demons screeched. Nessa joined her voice raw and breaking. As they chanted, the reflections began to crack. One by one, they shattered, leaving behind a glowing white mannequin with no face but a kind aura. It extended its hand. The boutique exploded in white light. Amara and Nessa awoke on the boutique floor. The early sun filtered through the windows as if nothing had happened. The mannequins were still, back on their stands, cold and unmoving. The boutique appeared normal, untouched by the nightmare that had unfolded hours earlier. But something was off. Near the dressing room, Amara's phone lay on the floor, screen shattered, but the red recording light still blinking. Nessa picked it up with shaking hands. Amara unlocked the screen, and they opened the last video file. The footage was unstable, distorted visuals, static, and the sound of frantic breathing. It showed mannequins circling a glowing wedding dress, performing a slow, unnatural dance. Their joints cracked, their limbs twisted in angles that no human could imitate. Amara covered her mouth. She wanted to scream, but she held it back. Nessa dropped the phone like it burned her. Amara knew what she had to do. That very evening, she packed up the boutique. Every item, every dress, every cursed piece of plastic. With kerosene and matches, she set it all ablaze behind the shop, in the clearing behind the alley, where whispers were louder than wind. As the flames engulfed the mannequins, they screamed. Not creaks, not melting plastic. Voices. Loud, shrieking voices, as if dozens of souls were trapped inside. The fire twisted into faces, mouths open in agony. Only Amara, Nessa, and Grace could hear the voices of the mannequin as they perish. Their voices were too loud in their head, and it nearly drove them insane. They held their head, trying to contain the voice in their head that almost drove them mad. The people passing by wondered if they were insane or just acting up. The last mannequin cracked apart slowly, deliberately, as though resisting its fate. As the flames reached its face, it turned toward Amara. Its lips moved. "This is just the beginning." Then it turned to ash. Months passed. Amara relocated to Ibadan, craving silence and normalcy. She found a small apartment in Bodija, opened a modest tailoring shop, and tried to bury everything in her past. Nessa also moved on and started working at a community school. Grace, though still shaken, disappeared from the public eye, rumored to be somewhere up north. Life was beginning to feel safe. One sunny afternoon, Amara entered a new boutique that had opened just a block from her shop. She needed a dress for a small event. It was brightly lit, welcoming, and filled with soft music. She smiled, running her hands over the fabrics and appreciating how peaceful everything seemed. But as she moved toward the back of the boutique, everything changed. The lights flickered, the air thinned, the mirrors distorted, and then a cold hand gripped hers. A mannequin, not just any mannequin, one with a crack on its chin, one she had burned. It moved its head slowly toward her. Its plastic lips parted. "You can never run away from me," it whispered. "You think by burning me, you ended your suffering? I am coming for you, and this time, you will never survive it." Amara couldn't move. Her eyes widened. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. Then, "Madam, madam?" came a voice. She blinked. A shop attendant stood beside her. Do you like the dress? You've been standing here for over an hour." Amara looked down. Her hand was still on the mannequins. The boutique was normal again, but something inside her had cracked. She dropped the dress and ran out into the street. From that day, Amara swore never to step into a boutique again. She locked her tailoring shop, turned away every customer, and stayed in her room for weeks. But even there, in her dreams, the mannequins came, and this time, they were no longer confined to glass and cloth. If you like this story, please subscribe to my channel for more interesting stories like this.